Hey everybody. I've been promising slash threatening to do an Ask Me Anything type video for a while now, so I have gathered some questions and thought I would make a little video, just answering sort of the most common questions I get, that kind of thing. Um, I'm gonna do, hello, that's my kitty right there. Guest appearance, cameo, photo bomb. That's my life. Yeah. I'm also going to do a separate one that asks questions that I've got that are more about writing, from a writer's perspective. I'm going to do a separate video on that. So let me jump on in. And there's a couple questions that I get asked all the time. So I don't want to I don't want to attribute them to any one person and offend anybody else. So the most popular question that I get all the time is, will there be another Joe book? And the answer to that is, I really hope so. I really want to write another one. If I have anything to say about it, there will absolutely be another Joe book. I would love writing Joe for as long as people want to keep reading her. So hopefully. Another big question that I get it often is, where do I find the inspiration for my books? And that is a really complicated question because it's different for every book and everything I've ever written. So sometimes it can be just the simplest, just a sentence that I hear somebody say. And I think that is just amazing. What if? So, um, for example, I just recently heard a tagline from old movie from ages ago that was, a guy walks into a police station and he says, "I've been murdered." Um, and I just love that, and that kind of thing will sit in my mind and it'll percolate and it'll run. Sometimes it's a character comes to me. Sometimes, I've always been the kind of person that I will, if I'm sitting on the bus or the BART train, for those of you from not from California, that's Bay Area rapid transit system, sitting on a BART train and I'll, look around and I'll see people and I'll be like, what is their story? I wonder what their deal is. Like, if they were a crook, what kind of crime would they have committed? And so sometimes those little seeds just build in my head and turn into something that I want to write. And I'll get into a couple of more specific ones here in a little bit. Okay, so this one, Chloe asked, but I do get this one a lot as well. And that question is Joe in my next book? So, up for pre-sale now. The Vacation is coming out in May, but it's up for pre-sale now. It is a standalone, so Joe is not in that. But I want to make sure that everybody knows that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be any more Joe books. It's just that was a standalone one that I wanted to write, that I wanted it to be more about the journey that the characters go on, than the journey that the detectives take to find it. And if you're watching this, you probably already read a couple of my books, and you know that I tend to blend perspectives, so the detective is not the only perspective in my book. But this is one where I really wanted the major focus to be on um, people's perceptions that were in the situation. So she's not in that one. That does not mean that we will not see her again. Okay, Ileana asks, do you feel that Jo is finally ready to let someone love her and let her walls down after the lesson that she learned in The Other Mothers? She says, we saw a glimpse of that, and I want happiness for her, Chloe says. Chloe, thank you. I want happiness for her too. Sadly, I can't always give her that. But to answer the bigger question, do I think she's ready to let someone love her? I think that she's still on a journey. Um, but my hope is that with book 4, she got to a new place on her journey. So the person that she was in the first 3 books especially is not the person that she is now with respect to her relationships with men. And on the surface of it, it looks very much like she doesn't trust men, when really it's herself that she doesn't trust. So themes of trust are very important in The Other Mothers, and I'm hoping that Jo has crossed an important threshold in her ability to trust herself and thus other people. That doesn't mean it's not going to be complicated from here on in, but my hope was with book 4 she became a different person, and hopefully that will mean that she'll have new sort of things to work out, new sort of things to learn in the next few books. So we'll see, but I hope that that's where she's heading. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and skip to follow right up from that. I have a few questions that a book club sent to me. I went and I talked to their club, and I talked way too much and didn't answer nearly enough of their questions. So I'm going to try to hit a couple of their questions here. And one of those questions was from Jody, and she asked, "Do I have a plan for Joe?" I think that goes really well with that other question. And I do have a plan for Joe. In my head, the next 3 books are all sort of planned out, both with respect to the main mystery that Joe will be solving, but also with respect to the journey that she's on and how all of that relates, how the mystery she's solving relates to her personal journey and where those are going to allow her to grow. So yeah, I personally, my goal for Joe is to have her all growing and changing, and evolving over the course of the books. And that's really important to me, and I'll just leave it at that. All right. So a couple more from that the book club. So Carrie asked, "Are there plots or happenings in your books that are based off of certain experiences or true stories?" And the answer to that is always is yes, to some degree. Like there are plenty of things in the books that come directly from my own head, but there often are things that are true. So or based on things that I've experienced. Not exactly nothing that's ever completely true. So, for example, in the Dancing Girls, which of course involves it involves World of Warcraft, and spoiler alert, skip through for a few seconds, and I'll put in the link if you don't want to hear this part of the spoilers. That won't spoil the whole book, but it'll spoil a little bit of it. I have a serial killer who uses World of Warcraft, an online game, to hunt his killers, his victims, and I used to play World of Warcraft, loved it. Loved it too much, takes up too much of my time, which is why I had to back off of it a little bit. Um, and I saw people there meet strangers through the game, and form relationships with them, form romantic relationships with them. In fact, one couple I knew met on the game, fell in love, and got married. And I think from a romance perspective, that's amazing and wonderful, and I love it. From a I am terrified of human beings perspective, always all I could think of was, how do you know he's not a serial killer? How do you know he's not going to chop off your head when you show up? And so that was where the idea for the Dancing Girls came from. So it's based on something that I saw, and something that sort of terrified me a little bit. I had some worries about this kind of thing, on behalf of other people that I saw forming these relationships, and wasn't something I could personally understand, taking that leap of faith, because I watched too much true crime, probably, which is where a lot of my other ideas and things come from, or things I see in true crime stories that end up, I'll see something and I'll think, well, what if this happened, or how did that happen? Or I'll see a particularly weird way of killing somebody and think, well, that's got to be in a book. So all kinds of inspiration. The main source of my inspiration, I think, is stuff like that. All right. How do you come, Ashley asks, how do you come up with a backstory for each character? So I do go into I try to go into backstory for, victims and other suspects and things, because that's the kind of thing that I find interesting, to know about when trying to figure out who did it, the psychological motives involved there. And I think that goes back to part of what I was saying before about, like, I'll sit on a bus and I'll just be looking at people and going, I wonder this, or I wonder that. And so I tend to, even on TV or people I see in the street, or, whatever, I think, well, or a lot of times too, I'll be watching a show and I'll get really annoyed with the character and go, you shouldn't have done that. What you should have done was this. And then that person grows in my head, and I start thinking about, well, what if that character were put in this situation? So I play those kinds of games, and I think to myself, well, a person who would do that, what would lead them to do that? What could possibly cause you to even think about doing something like that? And I've always enjoyed kind of playing those games in my head, and playing with ideas, and characters like that in my head. So that's where that stuff comes from. Okay. I don't want this to be too long because, so I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here. Um, and Jody asks, do you have plans for another series? I think there are a lot of stories that I cannot tell with Joe. in Joe, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote The Vacation, because it was a different kind of story that I wanted to tell, and it didn't necessarily work. I think there are stories that I would love to be able to tell that a detective can't be involved in, because there are laws regarding the things that they can do, and there are behaviors that they cannot engage in. But for example, I love the idea of a private investigator who doesn't maybe have those limitations about maybe breaking into people's houses, or other stuff like that. So I actually have the first book in a series like that written, and I'm working on revising it, and I would love to find a home for it. So um, yes, the general answer to that is there are a lot of different kinds of stories that I would like to tell, and some are more kind of cozy stories, some are more detective-based stories, and however those have to get out of my head, I would love to be able to do that. Um, Chandra asks, and I get this one a lot from other people as well, what are your favorite authors? I would say that, I mean, I read just a lot of books across a lot of different genres, but especially within crime fiction, the two that I think have been the most important formative forces in my life are Agatha Christie and Sue Grafton. And Agatha Christie and her plots, and trying to match wits with her and see if I could figure out who her killer was. Lots of, I'm a big puzzle solver, so that was always amazing to me. And she's just, nobody can even come hold a candle to the kinds of plots and things that she comes up with. And then Sue Grafton, Kinsey Milhone is, I think, possibly one of my favorite, if not my favorite character in literature. I think she is such a great blend of a really strong moral compass. I mean, she has really strong ideas about right and wrong. And she doesn't mind, like I was saying, breaking into a house, maybe if she has to sneak in the back and get in there to figure out what she needs to bring a killer to justice, she's going to do that. And so she has a grit, but she always has this moral compass, and I've always found that really, really appealing for her. Even if she's sort of a little prickly on the outside, I actually find that really endearing about her. So yeah, so she's one of my favorites. Um, okay, I'm gonna try to keep this to 15 minutes. And I can do another one of these if people want, because I got tons more questions. Katie asks, what is the biggest challenge for you when starting a new book? The biggest challenge for me is to not just jump right in, to just jump right in and start writing. I have to sit down, I have to make sure that I know certain of the motivations of who's going to do what, what the, yeah, obviously what the killer, who the killer is going to be, do some character work, do some research. But when I get an idea that really pulls at me, I just want to sit down and write. And so taking the time, doing what needs to be done, you know, that's possibly the biggest challenge. And uh, what motivates you most when writing a new project was the second part of that Katie asked. And I think what motivates me, again, that goes back to what inspires a given book. So sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a plot point, um, sometimes it's, a single line that I hear somebody say, and that just really drives me to want to write, the thing in my head that is being inspired by that. And I think let's do one more. And I think this is a good note to end on. Karen asks, what kind of projects do you wish you saw more of? And I think overall, I love books that have strong women in them. And I don't necessarily mean strong women in the terms of, women who will get in your face and punch you right in the nose, That's fine too. That there's definitely a place for that. But so for with respect to Jo, for my detective, one of the important things for me about writing her was she's not an in your face kind of person. That's not where her strength comes from. Her strength comes from trying to connect with people and trying to understand people, trying to put herself into their shoes and see what's motivating them. And I think that there is an important strength that all people can have, but I think women are taught it to be a little bit more, think think a little bit more of other people just in socialization, whether that's a legitimate thing or not and should be that way. I think historically that's been the case. So we tend, I think, to be trained a little bit earlier on to be in tune with these sorts of things. Um, I think whether it's a man or a woman, though, that shows a different kind of strength, a different kind of an ability to separate from what you think is maybe right or how you would do something, and really take into account what this other person wants or needs, and make that a part of your thought process. So I also think that trust is a form of strength, and that's one that, I've already talked about Joe struggles with. So I would like to see more strong women and more different types of strong women and more different types of strength in women. And right along with that, I would like to see more books that feature women supporting each other rather than tearing each other down. So women encouraging and fostering these strengths in other people and working together towards common goals. And I see more of that than I used to, and that makes me happy. And I try to write that, and I'm trying to write more of that. But I really would love to see more of that being modeled in the media that we consume. And because I think when young girls see that and see that way of relating to one another, that gives them tools for being able to do that themselves. So I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but that's something I believe strongly in. All right, so it's 16 minutes. I went a minute over, so I'm going to go ahead and end this now. If you have another question that you would like me to answer, or a question that you'd like me to answer, go ahead and put it in the comments here or send it to me somewhere on social media. I'll put all of those links down below. And I would, if you want to see another one of these, I would love to make another one of these. And so I will just end with saying thank you so much for coming and watching. All right, have a good afternoon, evening, day. Have a good one.